It's your weekly breakaway for fun conversations on pro cycling. Come and join us for another ride in the team bus. I'm Matt Harper, and together with my brother Justin, we'll do deep-ish dives on professional bike races, teams, riders, and all sorts of cycling-related stories. And we might just sprinkle in some other shiny pop cultural objects along the way. So jump in the saddle and tighten up those shoes. The road awaits. Allez!
Hello and welcome to the Team Bus. I'm Justin and this is my brother Matt. And today on the bus, it's the latest in our series called Two-Wheel Two-fers. We're going to review two somewhat recent cycling-related films, both centered around doping in the sport, and compare and contrast them. One is an acclaimed documentary called Icarus, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary in 2017. The other, not so much. That film, a wacky, mockumentary-style HBO comedy called Tour de Pharmacy, sends up the sport of pro cycling in a number of different ways, with a classic turn from Andy Samberg at the center of the zaniness. We'll use that conversation as a springboard to get into a consideration of pro cycling in mainstream culture, both before and at the time these films were released, and at our present moment as well. And as always, we'll finish out with more adventures in the Broom Wagon. Allez. Welcome to the show. We're going to jump right into it. We've done a lot in a short amount of time this week, and we're going to start with talking about the movie Icarus. It's an Academy Award-winning documentary on what seemingly kind of starts as a project to kind of see how doping in cycling and in sports, can be done and can be used. And it really evolves into a completely, different conversation and a really compelling story about the Russian Olympic doping scandal. I know that I took a lot away from it on this watch. I had seen it before, but I really took a lot away from it on this watch, especially on the side of the, kind of the Russian aspect of this doping program and it being, essentially nationally sanctioned and, paralleling it with our current political climate. It was just a very interesting way to start my week. So I really enjoyed it. Matt, how did you find it?
Well, I too had seen it before, and I remembered liking it before. And honestly, I didn't remember a lot of it because I pretty much blocked the entire second and third of this movie out of my head. All the stuff, with the Russian situation. I only remembered his experiment, that is sort of what hatched the film. But I really think that as a movie, the single most interesting thing about this is the fact that it started as one thing and it ended as something totally different. I mean, yeah, there's a through line. There's threads that sort of tie together what he set out to do and what he ended up doing with this film. But I think it's pretty clear that he did not see this thing coming at all.
No. It was it's very happenstance the way that it all, kind of comes together, because it does. It kind of starts out as this social experiment that, he's going to ride this race and, he's going to ride it clean, that he's going to, do a doping program and, he wants to
right. Well, let's explain it a little in a little bit more detail.
Sure.
For folks who haven't seen this movie or think about it, this guy, his name is Bryan Fogel. He's a director, producer, author, playwright, and after having made this film, a human rights advocate. They start off by sort of giving you a little bit of his personal history in competitive road cycling, and just his awareness of cycling from when he was a kid. He said he remembered Greg LeMond as being a thing. So he's got to be around the same age as me, because I too remember, before Lance Armstrong ever entered my existence or whatever. I remember being aware of Greg LeMond. He was, I guess his first Tour de France win was like 86, right?
Hmm.
Something like that. So I would have been like a sophomore in high school, or junior in high school. So yeah, I was aware of that guy. And then he kind of rolls through how he was a big fan of Lance Armstrong, and he get had gotten to a relatively high level in the sport. At least, he wasn't like Tour de France level, but he was high enough that he was in certain races with certain guys who did go on to be better. He talks to a couple of them in the film, most specifically David Zabriskie, who was like a teammate of Lance Armstrong. And he gives you a little background onto like the Armstrong doping, and they play some of those famous clips of
Hmm.
Armstrong, how clear do I have to say it, blah blah blah, and
I never
the
took
whole,
drugs.
yeah. And then cut to him on Oprah. Did you ever take a performance enhancing drugs? Yes.
Yep.
Um, so Vogel's got all this like swirling around in his head, um, and realizes that all the riders back then were doping. The conclusion that kind of the world sort of slowly came to over the course of this whole thing. Um, and I guess it was when he was talking to the founder of the UCLA Olympic Lab, this guy, Don Catlin, um, who says that he tested Lance Armstrong over 50 times and never caught him. And that's the guy who's like, yeah, they were all doping, every single one of them. This is the guy running the Olympic lab. He said the testing was super easy to beat, and this is what formed the foundation of like Bryan Fogel's project, to expose the inadequacies of the existing policies and procedures to catch athletes who use banned performance enhancing drugs. He wants to expose it. So yeah, he is on a bit of a crusade, um, but it's sort of America focused,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and so he comes up with this idea. He's going to do this race. That's the Haute Route in France. It's a 7-day endurance race, and it's considered like the hardest amateur cycling race on the planet. Um, and then he's gonna come back and do it a year later, uh, doping. And so his challenge is to, number one, do the race the first time, and then in the interim time he's going to have to come up with like a program and what drugs he's going to use, and where he's going to get them, and how the whole deal. And he's going to film the entire thing. So that as a premise is just tantalizing, to
Yeah,
say
it's
the
compelling.
least. And so he goes off and he does the haute route in France, clean.
Which
uh
looks to be the most brutal thing that you could do as a non-professional. The way they
right.
described it was like take the 7 hardest days of the Tour de France and put them back to back to back to back to back to back to back.
Exactly, exactly. So there's no flat like rest stage in between, to let you chill out for a little while or whatever. It's like each one of them is just like some other ridiculously gnarly thing, day after day after day for 7 days. It's 75,000 feet of climbing, 1,000 miles, and they have 440 riders enter this thing. He's shooting for a top 100. He gets 14th clean, and I think like really surprised the shit out of himself. Um, and so, yeah, so he runs the idea past Catlin. The guy likes the idea, but he's worried about the risk, mainly the risk to Fogel himself, like
Correct.
to do something wrong or whatever. Um, but Catlin agrees to design the program with him. He tells Zabriskie about it, and realizes that the big challenge is going to be finding a lab that can test his samples, right? Um, there's a thing where it's like there's only certain labs that can test these kinds of things, looking for that, and they have to be approved by WADA. You can't just have labs
Right.
out there testing willy-nilly, because it would just make it way 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 easier for people to cheat. So he's going to have to find a lab where he can somehow get his stuff tested without them finding out like what's going on, what he's trying to do. Um, but Catlin knows a guy. Enter Dr. Grigory Rodchenkov, the director of the Olympic Lab in Moscow. He's an old friend of Catlin's. He's a quirky guy, but he seems quite excited by the challenge of the
Yeah, yeah,
project. And we are to learn as this movie goes on that this man is the main focus of this movie,
yeah.
you know?
And it's really interesting when he does meet Grigory for the first time, or like I think it's like over Skype or something like that. And there's zero hesitation from him to be like, "Oh yeah, I totally will. Yeah, yeah, no problem. Yep, I got you." You know what I mean? But then, like as it starts to curve, it's interesting how his attitude, it never veers away from the science end of it, but you can tell as the movie progresses, like his mental state very much changes about what he's doing, especially as everything starts, all the layers of the onion start to get peeled away.
Yeah, and he does have a bit of an axe to grind, I think.
Hmm.
I think when he was younger, he was less dialed into the morality side of things and was just trying to do his thing and be successful in his chosen career. And as he gets older, he realizes that this is maybe not that great of a thing. And then, another thing that makes this movie so compelling is that there are real stakes on the line in this thing, real stakes, and it's playing out in real time as it progresses. Which is another thing that's like so great is that Vogel started this project and was very deliberate about getting all kinds of footage and everything that he needed. He's really trying to basically sort of like quote unquote record everything, and the story happens in real time. It's not investigative journalism where he's digging into something that happened in the past and he's interviewing people, but all the action was still in the past. No, like it's happening now.
Yeah,
And
everything starts happening to that guy then.
right, because that's the guy who's helping him get those samples over there and getting them tested and all that kind of stuff. And we meet some other characters along the way that are kind of helping him. Like they meet this guy, Scott Brandt, who's an anti-aging specialist who teaches Vogel how to like administer the PEDs to himself. And he helps him work up like his weekly doping schedule. He's like in the States helping him on that side. Um, but he, and he,
Definitely, that guy
he
definitely cared for for him. Like he was
mhm.
he was not he was always the voice of reason in that group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Vogel's Skyping with Rodchenkov in Russia, who's sort of walking him through like how to start collecting, what to do with the samples, how to keep them, blah, 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 blah. And Vogel wonders why Rodchenko would want to participate in this thing. He's like, what's this guy's angle, like you were saying. Um, so to his surprise, at one point, Rodchenko asks him if he's seen the movie about him. You remember this?
Hmm.
He kind of casually says it, and Vogel doesn't know what he's talking about. So Rodchenko points him to this 2014 documentary, which at the time was only like a year or two before that. It's from Germany. It's called "How Russia Makes Its Winners." And in it, you've got several Russian winner whistleblowers describing how Rodchenko was involved in widespread doping and cover up of top Russian athletes, right? So like this is the moment when this story takes this turn. You know what I mean? Um, and so now's when they start interviewing this guy Dick Pound, who was the former president of WADA, and a lead investigator into doping. He's one of the guys that's like put on this commission. Um, and Pound says that the film was like a huge bombshell. The Germans had been hesitant to release it until the Russian whistleblowers could be taken out of the country. The doc alleged that 99% of Russian Olympic athletes were doping, which is just nuts. And when Vogel's talking to Rodchenko, he says the fallout from the doc is getting more and more serious. And this is when they introduce this idea of like Russian state control.
Well,
And
and don't forget that Russia was hosting the Olympics in 2014.
right,
Like, and there's
the
that
Winter
whole back,
Olympics in Sochi.
yeah, in Sochi, which was, and it's really it's really wild because it's starting to fall out while he's making his movie. So you're following now that story as it's unfolding for this guy, because
Mhm.
it snowballs after he meets him, which is so wild that it's coincidental in that sense. And that he
Mhm.
had the sense to be like, oh shit, this is the real story.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep rolling. I'm gonna follow this. If I'm gonna keep pulling on this thread. Um, so um, at one point around this time, Vogel speaks to this guy Ben Stone, who's a sports physiologist, and this guy gets agitated in the interview. He's explaining that the guy Dick Pound, the guy from WADA, that they had interviewed, he was there. He was a 15-year head of WADA. he, uh, Stone tells him that guy's been hired to lead the investigation of Rodchenko. This is when he learns that Rodchenko is under investigation, and Stone is like agitated over Vogel's relationship with Rodchenko, and he's like, this is a bad idea. Like this shouldn't be going on. Well, at this point in the A story, um, they're at the point where they need to get the testing done, right? Like he's got all of his samples, and because he's still
Yeah, he's still
thinking
gonna
this
race them.
project is going to happen. Um, but Rodchenko is like, everything's really hot right now. We got this investigation looming. Um, and he's like, we can't test the samples anywhere in Russia. It's not going to work. I'm going to have to come over to the United States. And he manages to get out of Russia, and he comes to the States on his first trip in 2015. And him and Vogel like go hard into the training. And it should be said, like, this guy Rodchenko, he's a character.
Hmm.
He's quite a character. He's a funny guy. He's a funny looking guy. He looks like Gabe Kaplan from Welcome Back, Kotter. It's his silly mustache, and he's just he's a funny guy. He's not like
He looks like Jerry
super self.
Gerwitz.
Yeah, he's not self serious. Um, but he does know his stuff, and he can be very frank about what's going on. I mean, he's truly a great ally, I think, in terms of trying to tell the story for Vogel.
Yeah, 'cause
um
he's an open book, man. Like, he doesn't
mhm.
hesitate with anything.
Well, yeah, he gives it up that, like, in his history he was like a gifted runner, and he was a doper. He said his mother was giving him his injections, but he didn't lack the physiology or whatever to get to the very, very top, and that's why he pivoted to the sciences, and he got into the anti-doping world, which where his star like rose very rapidly. He found it was something that he was good at. He was really good in the lab, and he runs Vogel through like what it's like to run a Russian lab. And the ironic thing here is that the state is fully cool with doping in Russia,
Right.
and yet
Well,
they have this
he
there's a
was doing the
robust
testing
anti-doping
for
lab.
the Olympics.
Mhm.
He was doing the testing for the Olympics. Like,
And
he was the head of that department.
and the thing about it is the place, it was a state-of-the-art testing lab. Like it could do it could live up to its mandate and everything. What the cheating, the doping cheating, um, was in how
He
they
was helping
how they
them
but how they
hide it.
moved the samples, how they swapped
Oh
out,
yeah.
fake. It wasn't that they were generating fake results. Like they
No, no,
weren't
no,
like
no.
testing doped blood and then saying on the other end, no, this blood is clean. It wasn't that. The cheating took place
It was a swap.
before anything even got to the lab. But Rodchenko was able to help facilitate that, and that is, I think, one of the coolest parts of the movie is when he gets into the description of like when they're showing these like 3D graphic renderings of like the buildings and how the drugs were moving
Oh
through,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Well,
all the
so
craft of it was amazing.
what he had said was that this is one of the parts that I found the most interesting. So and he was talking specifically about the Sochi Olympics at this point. Okay, so at that point in the movie where they're talking about that, he's talking about how they were literally cheating at the Sochi Olympics and the way they were doing it. So they had clean samples for all of their athletes. Okay, and so the way that it worked is the athlete would give the sample, and the sample would be split into two. One sample automatically went into storage. Okay, the second sample went for testing. If it tested positive, they would grab the storage sample and test it against that to see if it matches. If it matches, you're doping. But if they test it and they test the second one and it's clean, then they know there's something wrong with the test. But what they were doing was they were letting the dirty samples go off to the storage and doing a swap out, like a James Bond style swap out of the first samples with the clean samples. So like they were flat out cheating, but then there was like even, obviously more levels of it because they've been cheating the system. He ends up telling you for 30 years they've been cheating.
Well, that's jumping way ahead because like there's kind of this like last part of the film where it's like the whistleblower section where he actually runs you through the entire operation. But a few things happen before then that sort of build suspense or build tension. So Rod's made this trip over to the United States. He goes back to Russia and he brings all these samples with him, and Vogel is like wanting results. But as soon as Rod gets back, he's got Wada like leaning all over him and tells Vogel, look, man, you're gonna have to wait for the full results. But meanwhile, Vogel's like doped up and he's like his numbers are starting to move upward. And now is the time when it's time to return to France to do the haute route again, that crazy race. And this time he's got super high expectations, having gotten 14th the year before Totally Clean. He's like, all right, I'm doped, baby. I'm gonna crush this thing, man. We're gonna prove to the world that well, he has a mech on stage one. He finishes in 11th, like 3.5 minutes behind the leader. By stage four, which is on the Quad Affair, he's got another mech. His derailleur stops functioning. He drops 10 spots. He's down to 24th. He says he feels like he's stronger and recovering better, but the results don't show it, and he's bummed out. Drops down to 27th. Rodchenko is trying to cheer him up, talking about the importance of the project, all this information he's getting, but in the end, he's very disappointed, having done far worse. And it's just it's not the narrative that he was looking for.
Yeah, to make
this point
for Grigori, it's about him beating the testing. Like he give a shit. That dude give a shit less whether or not he won. He cared about,
of course,
he cared about if he was able to help him beat it.
Right, and so he's over there in France, and he's like, "Screw it, I'm just going to go to Russia right now. I'm already halfway there." And so he goes to Russia somehow, and Rodchenko shows him the lab. They runs him through how the testing will work, and how they'll start to like kind of paint the picture of this bigger story. And Bryan gets to know like Rodchenko's people and stuff like that. So around this time, or a little after this, in Geneva, the Wada and Dick Pound, who's like heading up that task force or whatever, the investigation, they announced the results. They found that the facts that they uncovered were even worse than the documentary claimed. Cover-ups, destruction of samples, bribes, payoffs. They said there's no way this could have happened without the consent of the state authorities. And in this case, that means Rodchenko. He's the state authority. And they recommended that he be removed from his position, his accreditation withdrawn, and that the Russian Federation be suspended from international competition as a whole. Shortly afterwards, however, the IOC kind of crumbles and says that Russian athletes they say that Russian athletes will be banned from the Rio Olympics, but I feel like then they back down from that. They did back down right?
from that. I think they got state pressure but they went under like a non-national flag or something, like a
right. So they uh, uh, Wada suspends the lab. Rodchenko resigns. It's not looking good for him, and Bryan is like worried. Rodchenko's hired a bodyguard. He's in Putin's Russia, and this is when like the specter of Vladimir Putin
Oh
starts to
yeah.
creep into this film. Um, of course they clap back on the Wada decision, talking about this is totally false. It's just like that's when I really started making the comparisons between our current American regime and what was going on. I mean, just listen to these guys like sitting there telling these just bald-faced lies.
Just lying
That one
straight
guy,
up.
yeah, the one guy is just like the paid mouthpiece, and he just lies, 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 and then you see it in the Chiron after the movie. Yeah, he was promoted to like vice president or something like that. Um, he tells Rodchenko tells Bryan that they're probably being surveilled when they're making their calls to each other, and he name checks Edward Snowden, if you'll recall. Um, so uh, the what is the IAAD suspends the Russians from international competition. Putin speaks out. He says they're just looking for a scapegoat, and this is when Rodchenko tells Bryan that like he needs to get out of the country,
Oh
and
yeah.
he needs Bryan's help. Um, and this is I thought the most tense sequence of the film was when Bryan is like saying his final goodbye to Rod while he's like getting ready to leave Russia. Um, and then when he's waiting for Rodchenko to get off the plane to see if he made it over, and you see him like kind of like wandering through, he's like, you're just like, shit, it's so tense. And he's just like his jolly self,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right, and it's at that moment when the interview, the whistleblowing interview begins. Rod has gotten out, and now he can break down for you like how this whole system
Everything
went
went.
down, and it's just fascinating. There's we learn that the head of Russian anti-doping died in early 2015 of an apparent massive heart attack at the age
Yeah.
of 52. Um, you know, Putin, see, Trump is like just modeling himself after Putin. Like I think Trump would love nothing more than to be able to like take people out with, poison gas, like shoved in their face in airports and have like death squads and stuff like that. Because like, yeah, like Putin will take somebody out if he wants to. Just no question about it.
And the creepiest part is when they would like show parts where they were, Russia was being accused, and he's like, "Nope, that didn't happen. Nope, no." Mm-mm.
It's crazy. So yeah, so they start the interview, and Rodchenko is talking about how WADA cracked down on all the steroids that were coming out of China. Like China was like the place where all the steroids in the world were produced, and WADA starts cracking down on that, and it was harder for the Russians to acquire steroids. But Rodchenko, through his connections in his world, had a good contact. So he goes from being the top like tester in Russia to being the guy like running the steroids programs for the athletes.
Yes.
So that's like when he was at his worst and his guiltiest. But
Well, and they were
he,
like, he had, it was my understanding that he had done something to land himself into a position where, like, they were able to put pressure on him. Like, they were like, you do this for us and we'll get you out of this other bad spot. I don't know. I think he may have been in prison.
well, so but he's going back and talking about like how it all started,
Yeah, yeah.
and he
That's what
said,
I'm saying. When he originally got into that role, it was, I'm pretty sure that they, like, got him out of prison.
no, here's what happened. He crossed one of the other top people in the program, and he suddenly became a target for them. Um, and at one point he attempted suicide even, but his wife rescued him. He said he like slit his
Hmm.
wrist, but his
Hmm.
wife rescued him. He went to a mental hospital. He was plied with mind drugs. He got sent to an even worse psych clinic. But somehow while he was in there, he was recruited back into the doping squad because he was the best one. So they came and they got him out there. They realized, now this guy's wasted here. And his case with the government got dropped.
Yes.
Why? Why? Because Sochi was coming up and Putin was wanting him to help with, engineer their success in Sochi. Um, and
And they had already been cheating in the previous Olympics in
right.
Beijing and in London.
So let's see. So if you skip ahead to 2016, um, Bryan and Rodchenko, while they were in America, they meet with a team of New York Times reporters for 3 days to break the story. And Rodchenko spends a few more days with the Department of Justice. He's giving them lots of info about the state-sponsored doping in Russia. Though he did not tell them that he had already spoken with the Times. When they learn this, the DOJ tells them they're no longer interested in working with them and that they're going to prosecute him instead. So now he's looking doubly fucked. So he goes back and he details about how after they won the hosting privileges for 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, that Russia, if they wanted to, they could have gotten all of their athletes clean. But it was decided from the top that it was more important for Russian athletes to make a good showing than to participate clean. And so, as the games began, the story in the Times drops at the Sochi, and then Rodchenko states very straightforwardly that at the Sochi Olympics, dirty samples were actively swapped out with clean ones. And this is when it gets into the whole process that you were talking about earlier, about how these samples were like moved around and just how totally thought out this thing was. I mean, it's just, they're just so
Well,
guilty. And what happens?
they had
Go
like the
ahead.
KGB was literally like in the
Mhm.
building next door. I mean, it was like a complete operation.
Yeah, and the takeaway is that if this kind of stuff can happen, there's no way that WADA can really successfully do its job if like the samples aren't even getting there. And what happens at the Sochi Olympics? Russia cleans up. They lead the medal count, and then shortly afterwards, Putin's feeling all full up, and he invades Ukraine. Not the
Yep.
current Ukraine war, the
Yep.
one before that. And Rodchenko is feeling like he somehow helped. Putin's popularity is like in the doldrums before the Olympics. Afterwards, it's
All time high.
skyrocketing. He's emboldened. He goes on the offensive in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Time story is blowing up. DOJ's unreachable, and it's looking like Rodchenko may be arrested. Putin denies everything, says Rodchenko is a slandering turncoat, and this leads to a 2016 launch of an investigation into Russian doping by the Department of Justice based on Rodchenko's testimony. This is when things get really rough for Rodchenko. Story is huge. Russia starts slamming Rodchenko, starts going after his family, et cetera, et cetera, which is another like super scary part of it. Like he's got a wife and kids still in Russia.
Oh,
He's
and
bugged out.
they definitely said that they took him at one point. They had snatched up his wife and kids.
Yeah, yeah. Like they didn't disappear them, thank God. But it is dangerous. Like even not being in Russia, it's still dangerous for them. They've done extrajudicial killings and stuff like that. So uh,
When did they
Bryan,
when did they put him into the witness protection? Was that further down the line from where you're at now?
yeah, yeah. So what happens is just prior to the 2016 Rio Games, after 2014 Sochi happened and everything, Bryan now sort of like enters the story as a reporter, and he has that meeting where he's with like Olympic Committee member, the director of the Canadian WADA lab, WADA's chief investigator and director general, and then two IOC athlete commission people, and they're all like completely shocked as Bryan's presenting these findings. And in June of 2016, the entire Russian track and field team is banned from the Rio Olympics. Basically, McLaren and this commission is announcing that they've got just plentiful evidence of tampering of samples. Meanwhile, Russians are going on interviews saying it's like a one-man job. There's no evidence, blah, blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
the McLaren report confirmed that more than 1,000 Russian athletes had participated in the Russian doping program.
Right.
A
Right.
thousand.
So by July, WADA is recommending banning all Russian athletes from the Rio Games. Putin lashes out. This is when Rodchenko decides to go in the witness protection program, bids a very sad farewell to Bryan at the airport. The the IOC dismisses WADA's recommendation for a total ban. This is when the IOC caved, and now 291 Russian athletes are allowed to compete, with many medals forthcoming. So, and this is kind of where the film ends. There's some stuff at the end of the film that reveal that like one of the top Russians stepped down while another was made vice prime minister by Putin. That was the guy that was like the mouthpiece.
Yes.
And Rodchenko remained in the witness protection program to this day.
Did you happen to see, like, I didn't think about it until just now to see, like, what, whatever happened to him subsequently. Did you look into that at all?
I did. I mean, I read I put a link in there to a fairly recent CNN article about Rodchenko. By recent, I mean maybe like 5 years ago. Fogel went on Joe Rogan 4 or 5 years ago and went through his whole thing and then gave an update on Rodchenko. I think he's still just like over here and kind of in a holding pattern. And then there was a sequel made to this movie called Icarus: The Aftermath. But it's basically impossible to see. Like, too controversial, and the corporate interests that own these things do not have any interest in this thing getting out. So I did provide a link to a short video about the impossible to see sequel, Icarus: The Aftermath, but that's about all you'll be able to see. So all in all, I thought this was a phenomenal film. Just it moved, it held my, it kept me in suspense, and it was just some great reporting. And I think the fact that it won the Academy Award is certainly one great testament to its quality. What did you think?
I thought it was just a really great highlighting of the intersection of sports and politics, and how this pride filled kind of oligarchy-esque way of doing business that is now becoming the norm here in our own country is just, it's wild to me that these things can happen, that you can have I mean, this is a massive government conspiracy. I mean, it's so insane to me to think. And they talked about it going on for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like, this wasn't an isolated event. This was a pattern of behavior for many, many years, and that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah. It's really wild, and just like the Putin of the whole thing, it's just so creepy. Like the amount of power that guy has, and like the stuff that he's willing to do is just it's completely wild. You got to feel for those Russian athletes too, to just be caught in the crossfire and
Just wanting to win. Yeah.
Right, and to not even have a chance. You like to either like you are going to take these performance enhancing drugs. We don't care. Like, we'll do don't worry about getting caught. We'll make sure you don't get caught. You just take, it's just
do what we say.
Bad situation.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap that up. We'll come back. We'll talk Tour de Pharmacy. Stay with us.
Don't miss Beyond the Slipstream, our weekly companion podcast to the Team Bus, our domestique, if you will, dropping every Saturday in your usual podcast feed.
Welcome back. We're going to jump into our second movie, The Tour de Pharmacy. This is a short mockumentary style comedy that was done by HBO. It's on HBO Max here in the States. I'm not going to lie. I find it really funny. I don't know how you feel. I know that you were like a little sour on it when we kind of talked about it, but I do find it to be very, very funny.
I find parts of it funny, and I find that the other one that they did around the same time is way funnier. But we can get into that. Yeah. We should note it's directed by Jane Szymanski and Murray Miller, I think was the writer as well, and it stars Andy Samberg. The first one of these two, they did two of these films. I think they were kind of based off of like 30 for 30.
Yes,
thus the
100%.
the brevity of it, because it's like only a little over an hour long, which was fine by me. Same with the first one. The first one's called 7 Days in Hell. It's about a fictitious tennis match that became the longest match in history. It was loosely based off of a match Isner versus Mahut men's singles match at the 2010 Wimbledon. Um, so that was their first one, and then they did this one. And it's sort of a parody of like investigative documentaries, which Icarus is an actual one, and then it's also um, not just, but it just sort of it just parodies old documentaries, in
Yes, in
general.
general. Um, First, I loved the cast. I think the cast is great. Um, Sandberg is great. But
Right. So Sandberg plays Marty Haas. He's the first ever African cyclist to ride the Tour from Nigeria. And the joke is that he's like the privileged son of a diamond mine owner and he's white and he doesn't really represent real Africans, but like he's so dumb and vacuous that like he doesn't get that fact. Uh
it, his
and
his his present day version is played by Jeff Goldblum, who is he's probably my favorite of the older versions of the younger actors.
yeah. Yeah, he was good. That was a funny character. Sandberg is solid. I mean, he was like really like just dialed in back then when they made this film too.
Mhm.
And then let's see. So the other four you had Slim Robinson. So this is portrayed by David Diggs with Danny Glover as the older version. He's the son of Jackie Robinson. It's
No,
also
he's the
this is based
nephew. He's the nephew of Jackie Robinson.
and this is based around the 1982 Tour de France. So that's like the time frame where it's set. So he wants to be the first of something like Jackie Robinson was. So he decides
My, the
he's going to go into the Tour de France because he wants to be the first black man to break the color barrier in the Tour de France, right?
Yeah, and the great Danny Glover line was my uncle, or maybe it was the younger version, but he said my uncle was the first black something.
Right.
That was,
I want
that
to
was
be a
that,
black
he's
something.
like, I want to be a black something, which I just thought
All right.
was so funny.
So then you had Adrian Baton, the great French mystery, who's actually a woman pretending to be a man, played by Freddie Highmore, and Julia Ormond is the older version. And I love this character. Just
Yes,
funny. Of
the
course, it's
mustache, dude. The mustache is so funny.
in the name the surname Baton, which means like club, like penis. So, oh, Baton. It's just, so funny. And then you had Gustav Ditters, who's the enormous Austrian that's supposed to sort of be like a Schwarzenegger type, who went from scrawny to Schwarzenegger in the space of one season, played by John Cena with Dolph Lundgren in the older version, which I liked. I thought that
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
fun
yeah,
choice.
yeah. 100%.
Um, right, and then the writer who doesn't have an older version is Juju Pepe, who was the womanizing Italian rider portrayed by
Orlando
Orlando
Bloom.
Bloom, who perished during the race.
Yes. Well, that's
Um,
that's your very first scene is him, dying essentially.
right, right, and listeners will recall Juju came up like on the show a couple weeks back when I caught that sign of the what is it? What does it say? Juju something, and it's two of the different
Adri,
characters.
Adri.
Yeah, yeah, Juju Adri, um, and yeah. So you're right. The film opens up with his death, who's like riding in a race and like has a heart attack or something,
Yeah, while
and
he's relieving himself on the bike.
right, and he's on this crazy downhill. He's at the top of this insanely long downhill, and
No,
he
no,
and he
yeah,
dies,
he's at
and he
the top
dies,
of the
but he
climb.
slumps over on his handlebars, but he stays on the bike for 10 kilometers while dead. Somehow, just like the downhill force. By the way, that made me think of something. I heard someone recommend on a podcast, just threw a shout out for like this brief video of a tire rolling down a mountain. Have you seen this video? It's like some stunning drone footage capturing something that is really kind of mind-boggling, right? it starts off this drone footage. There's a guy like up on the top of this big ass mountain that's kind of like rocky, but kind of covered with grass and rocks and stuff like that. And he's got a big old like tire, and he's like swinging it, and he swings it up above his head, and then he just launches it down the hill. And this thing is just like big and thick, and it's got this momentum, and and the drone takes off after it, and it is just going and going and going and going all on its own, just with the momentum of this downhill thing. It has to go for like a mile or more down this mountain. Could be 2 miles. I don't know. The video is probably 2 minutes long of
That's
this thing,
crazy.
just like, anyways. Um, so yeah, so Juju dies on the bike. Um, and this thing is just a joke fest from beginning to end, like, and it's always leaning into the absurdist side of everything. Um, they interview Stu Ruckman, the head of WADA, uh, and he's listing all of the chemicals that were found in Juju's death, in his system after his death,
This is
and the
Nathan.
graphics start pop. Yeah, they
Yeah.
start popping up on screen, and then there's a second column, and then like it skips over, and it's like filling in the space behind his head. It's just absurd, you know what I mean? And one of the things he says, that's listed, he says, quote, a hormone from monkey testicles that he cooked down into a broth and drank, and at least one sandwich from Arby's.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the last thing, and at least one sandwich from Arby's.
Yeah, a bunch of great cameos. The narrator is John Hamm.
Yes, and
You
I
got
believe
some
he did the other
cameos.
one too.
I think so. And
Yeah.
you had some cameos of people as themselves, and then you had some other ones of like you had some cameos of people playing
Yes.
characters. Like Joe Buck was on there as himself.
One of the only, like, you couldn't get Bob Costas to do this. It had to be Joe Buck of all
Yeah, it
people.
was fine.
Like, I don't
It
know.
was fine. And then yeah, you had Nathan Fielder, Maya Rudolph was on there. She was funny. You
Adewale,
had
Akinnuye,
Mike,
Agbaha. You know who
yeah,
I'm
Mike
talking about.
Tyson as himself. Yeah, no, I know who you're talking
But
about.
he played the Nigerian guy, and
Yeah.
where he was just like, "Fuck Marty Haas, I hate him."
Yeah. He was hysterical. Who else? Will Forte was unbelievable. Felicia Rashad, J.J. Abrams. Um,
J.J.
Mike,
Abrams was actually really funny.
yeah, they were all pretty good. I loved Mike Tyson. They had the hilarious the graphics video game of Mike Tyson beating up a kid who stole his bike, which made him realize that he was better at fighting than riding a
Well,
bike.
it was meant to look like the Mike Tyson's Punch Out from
Right,
Nintendo.
Mike
Yeah.
Tyson's Punch Out, and then later on, there's a crash in the '82 tour, which leads to a huge roadside brawl. And Mike Tyson, they flash to Mike Tyson. He's like, "Cyclists are incredible athletes as far as endurance goes, but a great deal of them fight like little bitches."
Yeah, yeah.
A great deal of them.
That is like that's how they whittle it down for to be just focused on the five riders is
Right, because
very
everybody else
early
gets
on
kicked out.
they have a wreck, because Juju like grabs some chick's ass and
Right,
like
right.
lost control, wrecked the whole peloton. They all get into fights, and yeah.
Yeah. At one point, they show the cover of Peloton Weekly magazine from June of 1982, and one of the words on there, it said, "Review helmets. How lame are they?" I love little details like that. You had yeah, everyone on the tour gets busted for bribing the UCI except for the five main riders listed
Yes.
above. But the race goes on. There's the line, "If I have cheetah blood in my body, doesn't mean I'm a cheetah."
Yeah, no, yeah. So they say that everybody was under scrutiny after that happened, and they break into John Cena's room and they find the blood, and he's like, "No, it's a juice pouch." Or something.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll drink it right now."
Yeah, so he gets thrown out of the race, and then Slim leaves to become a farmer, and then Juju dies, and then the only two riders left are Marty and Adrian, the woman masquerading as a man, and they fall in love. And then in the finishing straight of the final stage, Slim reappears and he sprints against Marty and takes the win. There was one talking head in this movie that just was just beating the same old dead horse one joke the entire time.
Oh,
take a wild guess who that was.
You're gonna say Lance.
Of course, yeah. He was just Lance appearances like this just make me sick. I can't stand the dude. I just have a thing.
Well, I'm
fixated.
It's funny, man. Like, and I was gonna get into this later. Let's save him for a little bit because I want to use him to launch into a wider topic about where the state of things now. But I want to go through just a couple of my notes for parts that I just thought were absolutely so funny. I have a note here that says the $50,000 payoff does show that the makers don't really understand the sport, as the prize for winning was a sponsor gifted apartment. Okay, to the Tour de France back in 1982. That was real. Like the real winner of the 1982 got a sponsor gifted apartment. All right, there wasn't even a cash prize.
Right.
Hold on. So Chris Romano, who played the Italian guy with the small dick, all right,
mm-hmm.
He's been in a couple other things that I've seen. I think he's extremely funny. Like I loved that little part. Rex Honeycutt. Oh God, he goes so Rex Honeycutt is the reporter that is reporting on the Tour de France. He's riding with the riders. He's played by James Marsden. Right after the wreck in the fight, all right. He goes, as with all, Austrian accidents, or accidents in the Alps, a Saint Bernard was on hand, and there's the Saint Bernard, and he gets down under the little keg under the Saint Bernard and takes a drink, and his line is, he goes, "It's really peaty."
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was dying. It's one of the best lines in the whole thing. Chris Webber from the Wrong Fab Five was a great joke.
Yeah.
The excerpt from the documentary Cycle Nuts. That's also very good.
I have to say, like in both of these films that they did, they do not shy away from like the body humor, the nuts, the nudity, all that kind of stuff, which I think is funny. I like it.
I do. And it's at some point. Oh yeah. So Slim when he wins at the end, he goes, "Fuck Jackie Robinson and fuck Marty Haas with his fake African ass."
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, but let's go back. The only bit with Lance that I thought was funny was when he was fucking with the fur coat. That was very funny. But you're right. They kind of beat that same joke the whole time, and it wasn't very funny to begin with. It would have been much funnier if he had just been straight at it. But I get where they were going with it. But I have tended recently to be a bit of a Lance apologist, and it's funny is, I now look at the consequence of what he did in a bit of a different light. Now that I understand cycling more, and after kind of watching this and then asking some coworkers this week, I was like, "Hey, let me ask you some questions." And so I asked a couple of different guys. One, and the two that really stick out. One is a guy that's old enough to be my dad, but and then the other is a kid that's in his 20s, and I asked them, about, what do they know about cycling? And the older guy was like, Tour de France or whatever, and he's like, we were, more into mountain biking around here. When I was young, I was into mountain biking and this, that, and the other thing. And I asked him, I was like, what about you ever watch the Tour de France? Nah, it was never really my thing. And then I got to the 20-year-old and I asked him, and he didn't even know who Lance Armstrong was. Like, I don't know if he was particularly clueless, but I mean, he's probably 22, 23 years old. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I don't even really, he's like, the Live Strong guy. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, that's about all I know. I was like, you don't know like why he's famous? He was like, I don't know, something about a bike or something. And I was like, huh. And it really made me think. And it was like, this guy in his lies and his deceit, and his horrible behavior, has ruined a generation of American cycling. Like, at least as a sport. Like, I mean, he absolutely took the legs out from under it to the point where, there are people in this world today that just like don't have any awareness of it other than the fact that, like, yes, it's a sport. Like, you can't not realize that, biking is a sport, but have zero concept of it. And, that's his fault, man. Like, I mean, it's all of theirs fault. You know what I mean? But, for something that wasn't really giant in the States to begin with, he brought it up such a height, and then brought it down to a level that I don't know. Hopefully it's coming back. I don't know. I don't know that it'll ever be mainstream popular as far as a sport's concerned, like a televised sport.
If an American Tadej Pogacar type arises, because that's what it was. I mean, it was all based on the astounding level of achievement that the guy did. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was so bold and unprecedented, and just like so overpowering of a dominance of that sport by this like American person. Like, that's the thing that captured everyone's imagination. And, once that all came crumbling down, it's hard to imagine it, becoming as popular as it was then without some other kind of personality that can drive it. Like, I don't see, I mean, sure, it can incrementally make gains here and there. I mean, we've talked about it. We know what's going on in the 2026 U.S. cycling calendar, all of which is centered in areas fairly near to where we live.
Yes, which is great.
Which we're quite excited about. So,
But, you know, even as big as we think of, Tadej Pogacar, plenty of people don't know who Tadej Pogacar is. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Especially here. I mean, you might as well be, I could literally say any name and be like, who's the greatest cyclist, right? In the world today. No, I don't know.
I don't think a single person in my work, if I asked, do you know who Tadej Pogacar is? I don't think there's one single person that I work with that would answer that question. Yes.
I could guarantee you out of the 6 guys that I work with that not one of them would know who that is.
Right. I'm talking about 60 people.
Which is very sad to me, in in a big way, because it's like, it makes me sad that the sport is so misunderstood that, we could be living through, one of the greatest, we're living through like essentially the Tiger Woods, of cycling right now. And, nobody gets it and nobody gives a shit. You know what I mean? And had he just not been such a piece of shit, and not, turned everybody's trust against the sport, it could be very popular right now. You know what I mean? It's kind of sad. And like the fact that like he's like being re-embraced later on down the line does kind of piss me off a bit, but I think for the majority of people that are within cycling, they just look at it like, he's the guy that got caught, everybody was fucking doing it. Like he was guilty, yes, but so was every fucking other person.
Yeah. kind of lost my train of thought. I mean, a lot of people got caught because he wasn't the only person that ever got, caught or admitted
No, but
to
I
doing
mean, he
anything.
was
Lots of
he
people
was
lost stuff. Floyd
definitely.
Landis lost his,
Well, yeah. I mean,
Contador
Landis is what
lost a couple.
started his. I mean, and it had they not thrown Landis under the bus, probably none of it ever comes to light, or at least they don't lose all the titles, they don't lose all the prestige. You don't have the Oprah of it all. I think that cycling in and of itself would have been happy for it to just go away, but once they put it rip the scab and the band-aid or whatever you want to call and pulled the rug out, once the cork was popped, they couldn't put it back in. And I think, the sad thing is that I do think that cycling would have been just as happy for that to never have happened, or at least never come to light. And they would have been much better, the sport would have been much better for it.
If like Lance Armstrong remained like the great American champion to this day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm fully convinced if it hadn't been for the way that he treated Floyd Landis, that Floyd Landis and them letting Floyd take the fall, all right, and then Floyd, he said, that he's the reason. You know what I mean? He has come out and said that he was pissed at Lance because of what they did, and he was like, "I'm not going down alone." And
Greg LeMond called him up and was like, "Yo, brother. Time to save the sport."
Yep. But I don't see. But that's the thing is I don't know that they did save the sport. Or at least not. I mean, obviously the sport is better off for it now, but you cost the American audience over it. And like I said, I think the sport in general would have been just fine with him staying the great American champion. I think they just wanted him to go away and just shut up and just retire quietly, and he did not come back, and he did not fuck with Floyd Landis, that none of that would have ever happened.
Yeah.
And I think you have a completely different landscape of cycling in America now.
I think the hope for the future lies in, number one, the youth. And I think that the globalization that has come via social media could be a thing that leads to a much bigger awareness and fandom in the United States. The Red Bullification of motorsports, cycle sports, extreme sports, speed sports, these things start to cross over. I love the fact, I guess, that Red Bull is sponsoring a team and individual riders are out there wearing the helmet, and that's gonna sort of lock a different set of eyeballs onto the thing.
No, and you're right. I mean, the tough thing for it is it's seen as an exclusive sport because it takes expensive equipment to be at the top level. Obviously, for leisure, you're fine. You can do it. The National Interscholastic Cycling Association is actively working to help shed the exclusionary image of cycling. But on the positive is that cycling is seen as a progressive sport when it comes to technology, when it comes to they're making strides as far as the women are concerned. The sport as a whole has embraced these other styles of riding that aren't just the pure racing. The cyclocross and gravel and the tech with the disc brakes and the wider tires and the e-bikes, and so there's a lot of positives, but then it comes down to one of our things that we talk about a lot is the media accessibility of the sport is also kind of hard. You know what I mean? Because it's not like the NFL where you know exactly where to find it every week. if you're not a fan and you're not paying attention to where this stuff is, it's hard to find here in the States. So, while there's things that are getting better, I think there are things that are also, kind of could use work.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, football is the watching of live football is sort of more aligned with the majority of people's schedules, the way that business schedules
Absolutely.
operate and stuff like that. And, you know, bike races are not always like that. And, Sunday morning is just not a time that Americans at large are sort of in the mindset of watching a
Yeah.
sporting event. It takes a certain type uh to want to do that. You know what I mean?
No, yeah,
Um
and I agree. I'd said to one of the guys that I was talking to, I was like, the crazy thing about cycling is that you could distill down, 9 weeks of grand tours into 5 hours of watch time and be as caught up as 90% of people. You know what I mean?
right.
And that is one thing that with the internet I feel does make it more accessible, but I think the reason why you don't see it become a little bit bigger is mostly because I think a lot of people don't understand it. I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? I didn't understand cycling before, it took me a year to really like, you know, have a grasp on all the subtleties of it, and then, another 5 years to really pick up on the nuance of it.
Yeah. And there's certain parts of watching a pro bike race that can get its hooks into you if you are into a a very narrow like subset of interests, as such as we've discussed before. Aerial photography, geography, and then bike racing itself.
Yeah.
Like
I think you get into it or you get out of it what you put into it. And there, if you want to find something that's, there's a lot of things to find if you're willing to look.
yeah, yeah. I will say on the side on the end of like in terms of public awareness, I feel like it's been quite some time that I have like brought up cycling and had someone who didn't really know anything about it like blurt something out about doping. Um, and I feel like at the same time I've had more than one conversation where somebody has said to me, "So what's the deal with like the drug testing in cycling now?" Or "What's up with that biological passport thing?" Or "What's up with that passport thing?" Like, and come at it that way, and found myself in a, explainer conversation where I was sort of running them through how the BP works. And
Yeah.
I guess that's sort of a refreshing turn.
Yeah. It just means that the world is progressing. Just like there are people that don't know who Lance the Jackass Armstrong are.
And I'll tell you this, not for nothing. I know it's just a single situation, but I was at my wife's company Christmas party last night, and I started chatting up one of the dads, and lo and behold, he's got a son who is like 7 years old, and he is already kicking ass in cyclocross. Like they're going to away cyclocross meets. They're driving down to the Carolinas so this kid at 7 years of age can compete in cyclocross matches. And we got off to the races talking about like pro cycling and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is nice. This is nice. I'm really enjoying this conversation right here. I want to come watch this kid do cyclocross. I want to go to a race sometime.
Hell yeah.
You know.
Hell yeah.
Um, so
Well,
that's a
you got
big
anything else?
positive. Yeah, I wanted to mention having watched 7 Days in Hell. Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen it.
Did you watch it again
I
recently,
watched
or
like half of it and then I never got back to it. Honestly, I totally forgot to go back to it, or I would have. I had plenty of time.
I absolutely adored this one. I thought this one was hysterical. Sandberg is like, what did I say? He is like the heir to Christopher Guest. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like his improv powers and the way he can create these bizarro characters is just incredible. He's basically like an Andre Agassi type guy with this insane haircut.
But he was
And
also adopted by the Williamses, like the Serena and Venus Williams, like
yes,
family.
yes,
It was a reverse
yes.
blind side, as they said.
The reverse blindside. Uh, the the cameos in this one are so hilarious. David Copperfield out of nowhere is hysterical. Um, Jim Lampley, Soledad O'Brien, and
McEnroe
then
too, man.
McEnroe, and then Fred Armiston was just insane as Edward Pudding. He's just doing a pitch perfect, like very particular British accent. Um, and then you had Michael Sheen. You know who Michael Sheen
I
is?
love Michael Sheen.
Yeah, he's so good. He's like the host of a sports show. He's so uncomfortable,
Oh
and he's like
God, yeah, and he's doing
infatuated.
like when he's like looking at his abs or whatever, and he's
Yes,
like kind of
he steals the
sweaty.
show. He steals the show. He's got his coat buttoned. He's smoking a cigarette, um, and then Will Forte. He's got this giant beard, and they go into this total left turn, like they veer off the plot, um, to go into this courtroom sketch artist thing where they start. Do you remember this?
Yes.
It's like a 10-minute aside in this movie where they're talking about the world of courtroom sketch artists. It's so bizarre. I was just I thought this one was the far superior of the two. um they do a parody of like a Swedish TV show, and Andy Samberg has become a Swedish like men's underwear designer, and he's designed a pair of a pair of briefs that have like the nuts like cut out, and they're like hanging out. He's got a pointer, and he's like poking at this dude's nutsack. It's it's something. It's something. So I just, yes, go if you are intrigued by either or both of these movies. Do seek them out. They're funny, and I think 7 Days in Hell is the better of the two. And no real comparing and contrasting with Icarus. It's just like there's no similarities between these two movies at all. You know,
No, other than the fact that they
it's all
were
contrast.
about doping.
Yeah, and honestly, the doping with Tour de Pharmacy is like it's not even that omnipresent. I think the title of the movie is something of a misnomer
Yeah, I mean, you
because
get like the bit about the drugs, and then the bit about the cheetah blood, and that's really it.
right, yeah, it's just it's a handful of jokes throughout this lots of other comedy happening in there. So I think the title of it and the Lance Armstrong of it had left me with a bad taste in my mouth. But yeah, it was good. I can't remember what I gave it on Letterboxd. I think I probably gave it 3.5.
I would bet that it was probably something like that. So, on that note, we'll be right back to take a pharmaceutical size dose of the Broom Wagon. Welcome back. We're going to take another ride in the Broom Wagon. Matt, what do you got this week?
So I'm gonna pivot off of something from last week that I left out or I didn't get to when we were when I was talking about the what was it, the golf the was the Gulf livery.
Yes.
Yeah. And I had mentioned that the livery was featured in the 1971 Steve McQueen film Le Mans.
Hmm.
And I, in doing my research, stumbled upon an example of a genre that I am quite smitten with, a genre of YouTube videos is quite smitten with, which is the modern trailer for an old movie. And there was a modern trailer that somebody cut for this 1971 Le Mans movie that's like it's got all the cool music and the cool editing and the graphics and everything that you would see like in a trailer from 2025, but it's the footage from 1971 from Le Mans. And I can watch these things all day. So I'm going to put a couple of links in the show notes to some of the ones I found that I enjoyed, which were Raiders of the Lost Ark, Casablanca, and Aliens. So check those out in the show notes. Check out modern trailers for old films. It's just one of the millions of cool things that you can unearth on YouTube.
Well, and trailers are one of those things that it's like you forget that they used to be really, really different. Like a trailer used to be very, very different from what it is now.
Well, that's why, and recently, because Raiders of the Lost Ark was from the 80s and Aliens, I think, was like around the end of the 80s, late 80s. Casablanca, I wanted to have at least one in there of like an old film, and man, that Casablanca trailer is awesome. Definitely watch all of those. They're so fun. So yeah, just a quick one this week for a recommendation to watch modern trailers for old films on YouTube. What do you got?
I wanted to shout out Lindsey Vonn. All right, so Lindsey Vonn, downhill skier extraordinaire, 41 years old, and she came in first in a World Cup race. Her first World Cup race since 2018. All right, but she won it at 41 years old, and not even like by like it was like by a second and like 1.13 seconds or something. It was like she won handily, and for an older guy, I love to see that somebody that's older is still kicking ass.
The last time she won a race, she was like 33.
Yeah,
34. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What a massive drought. Didn't she have some?
I think she had some like knee issues
or something.
Yeah, it's like surgical things. But she's back skiing on the World Cup tour at 41 years of age and won a race, which is so friggin' cool. It's not even funny. And it was like it's badass. I put a video in there. You can go to my notes. You can see it. See her run, and she is kicking it, dude. I mean,
cool. I'll put those
so fast.
I'll put that in the show notes then for sure. I love it.
So that's all for this week. Join us next week for our second annual resolution show. We'll look back on our resolutions from last year and rate our performances. We'll trot out a new set of resolutions for the upcoming 2026 season. Until then, for my brother Matt, I'm Justin Harper. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us again soon for another ride on the team bus. Ale.
The Team Bus is a production of Harperama. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please like and subscribe, smash that button, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, tell all your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Ale!